Hello, hello. Who's joining me for coffee and chit chat today? I'll wait for people to hop on. I'm excited to talk to you today. Maybe it'll be short and sweet, who knows? But I didn't want to go live tomorrow, which is Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there who are going to be celebrating tomorrow. Look at my hair, it's crazy. So I'm going to let people hop on, and then we're going to get to talking about IEPs, obviously, Fape, and what that means and how it applies and how you can use it. And because it's a very difficult thing, believe it or not, to prove. And then we're going to talk about how it kind of associates with COVID. And we're going to kind of sum things up with how you can prepare yourself and your child to get compensatory services because of COVID and their rights when it comes to that. Okay? So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Raven Woods, and I'm the CEO and founder of Autism Mama Rocks the IEP, and I help parents gain the knowledge and the confidence to become the CEO of their IEP meeting. So thank you for joining me today, for those of you who are joining me first thing in the morning. And for coffee, I got my coffee with me. And for those of you who are catching the replay, welcome. I'm glad to see you guys here. Make sure you post below, everybody, a 1 if you are new. That's 1 through 3 times. And then post a 2 below if you are an oldie but goodie. Okay? So a 1 below if you're new, 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. But remember, new people are 1 through 3 times. So if you've seen me longer than that and more than that, you're not a 1 anymore. So make sure that you say hi. Even if you're catching the replay, make sure you say hi. Okay? So we'll let people hop on. I'll still get started. You guys can always replay the beginning if you miss it. So we'll get started so we can move it along, okay? So hopefully you guys have your coffee with you, and we're going to get to talking about all this fun stuff. And I'm sure from, my questions in regards to the group, I asked certain questions of what your needs are and, just a couple basic questions like that with the top 3 things that you're concerned about in regards to your children. And I found that over and over and over, people are posting about certain things. And it's repetitive. And when that happens is when I really take a good look at that and try to create a live based off of those popular topics, if that makes sense. It's not that I don't address the smaller topics, because I kind of address those in what I do, but the hot topics, I guess would be a good word, are the ones that come up a lot in my questions for people who join my group at Autism Mama Rocks IEP group. So if you haven't joined, definitely do that. If you haven't clicked notifications when I go live, definitely do that, even if you don't jump on live at that time. Hi, Tara. Hi, Nicole. Yes, happy Mother's Day to everybody out there that is going to be celebrating Mother's Day tomorrow. Look at my hair. It's horrible. But you know what? It's first thing in the morning. That's okay. Saturday morning, right? So hopefully you guys have your coffee. So I'm going to first cover Fape. All right. So I'm going to read you the definition, which you can read yourself, of course. But then we're going to get into how you handle that and how you address that and how you can familiarize yourself with it and how, if needed, you have to prove it, that that's what's going on. Okay, so the section 504 at 34C.F.R, okay, it's in section 104.33. That matters, requires school districts to provide a free, appropriate public education, FAPE, to all students with disabilities. All right, so I'm just going over the basics right now. An appropriate education is regular or special education and related aids and services. Okay, that includes accommodations and modifications. And designed to meet the individual educational and unique needs of students with disabilities as adequately as the needs of the student without disabilities are met, and that are developed in compliance with Section 504's procedural requirements. Implementation of the IEP developed in accordance, okay, with the Individual Disabilities Education Improvement Act is one means, and basically what it means is it has to meet the standard, all right? So OCR interprets the Title II regulation to require school districts to provide Fape to the same extent required under Section 504 regulation. So OCR and, Fape, as far as idea, are very like one another. They're both federal, all right? But that doesn't mean that they're kind of the same, okay? You can't make an OCR complaint on certain things, but Fape is one of them, dependent on what it's about. A lot of things that OCR covers, and we talked about this in a live before, is more on Fape in regards to accommodations and modifications being provided. It has to do with discrimination and retaliation, among some other things, okay? You can look up OCR and be more clear on what that covers. I actually recently made an OCR complaint, but it was very detailed. They don't just take cases on. They actually pick and choose, and so you have to have a pretty solid case to be able to do that. It has to be very clear. And so they take their time to make sure that it is, and then they message you back and say, okay, we're going to take this on, or no, we're not. All right. And more than likely, if they take it on, it's going to be founded. Okay. So that is what the definition of Fape is. What does that mean? That's more legal jargon that I personally did not understand when I first started out. I didn't even understand how to even see it, or, in regards to my child's IEP. Like, how do you, recognize, that appropriate education is being delivered when the school system does nothing but say, oh, they're making progress. Oh, they're doing this. They are doing all of this. We have the schoolwork. We have this, or whatever, based off observations. Who cares about the school's observations? That's their opinion of your child and how they're doing, is my interpretation of that, okay? Because just hypothetically, all right, look at it like this, because I always like to be devil's advocate, all right? So what appropriate possibly means to you may be different than it is to me. So if a teacher, it could be two different teachers. They could go in and observe your child and have two different types of opinions. And as long as they're not talking to each other, I bet you their documentation will more than likely be different. Maybe not in a huge way, but more than likely it's going to be different. Why? Because they interpret and visualize and digest things differently than the other person, just like you and I do, right? So when it comes to Fape, it's very important to make sure that you're very clear on what it means, especially if you're going to make a complaint, whether that be a state complaint, an OCR complaint, going to due process. It has to be really clear because it's very difficult to prove. I'll tell you some tips and tricks. We will get there, I promise. But it's important to understand that it's difficult to prove and that you really have to do your due diligence to do that. I teach this in my course on, hunting and gathering. So when you basically are denied something from the school that is required, needed, appropriate for your child in order for him or her to be successful in the educational setting, and those things that are denied are based off the impact of disability and are basically preventing them from making progress. All right. And that's a big, big, big deal. And being in violation of this is a huge hit on the school system. All right. So it's important to understand that them being compliant and them implementing your child's IEP with fidelity is extremely important. All right. And the school, If you've ever made a complaint, I don't know about you, but when the school's rebuttal comes in, it almost makes me laugh sometimes. Because when I make a state complaint or I make a complaint, I make sure I got my, I's dotted, my T's crossed, I got it straight. All right. I know I got proof to back up what I'm saying, right? So how do you know what you have is going to back up what you say? Again, we'll get there. But you have to make sure you have your proof, because let me tell you, the rebuttals that the teachers and the team really come up with, and usually it has to do with the director of special education too, to complaints that anybody really makes. And, in regards to what you say, because basically you submit your complaint, it goes to the school system and the district, and it goes to the state. And then the school system has time to develop a rebuttal by a certain date. And then you actually have time, both of you, to submit more data and documentation after that. All right. And when you submit stuff after that, you can't make it look like, even though it more than likely will, you can't make it look like you are arguing their argument. So you have to really be kind of not sneaky, that wouldn't be the word, but very organized and proficient with your wording. And, there's a way to flip how it sounds. So it's not like, oh, what they said in line X, Y, and Z is not true. You want to make it more about, okay, let me look at what they wrote. And then how is it that I can provide a rebuttal to it without seeming like I'm arguing what they're saying? Make sense? So you have to be able to be very smart with there's a word I'm thinking of. I can't figure it out. You know how words just lose you? Here it is. Strategic. You have to be strategic with the way you respond to when they send a rebuttal. Okay. And I get excited about this part. I really do. I love being strategic. It's not so much of one-upping. It's not so much of anything like that, but it is a feel-good feeling when you're like, when the whole point of you making a complaint or anything like that, whatever complaint it is, the whole point is because you're pissed off at something or they didn't do something. There's a reason for it. We don't just go and make complaints just to make complaints. And so it's exciting when no matter what they say, you've got it covered, if that makes sense. All right, so just make sure your school is implementing the IEP with fidelity, and your IEP at this time, dependent, again, as we've talked about, if you have mandatory virtual education versus distance education. Distance education is more like you're on the weekend and the IEP is not in place. However, IDEA is still in place. So that's where compensatory services will come into play. I've kind of stalled and stopped at, I think, 20 in my IEP challenge. I promise I'm going to get back to it in my group. But at the same time, I have stalled on that because there's work to be done. And if it's not done, then it's not going to be productive. Me continuing is not going to be, the next 10 days is not going to be productive. So it's important to do really 1 through 3 in the beginning, which is recording your child at all times, because in all honesty, that's your way of collecting data. And we're getting to what Fape is, right? So you have to collect observational data and objective data on your child. And right now it can't be what was put in writing. If it's not put in writing, it never happened, because the teachers and the school system can't see your children right now. So you have to document it. And the only way to document it as proof for you for later on to receive compensatory services is to record your child. You need to record your child in all areas, in behavior, in how they're doing their work, and what their work looks like. So you'll record what it looks like and what they're doing. It doesn't even have to be when they're doing it, but that does kind of give you some substance. And then you need to look at, is their handwriting going down the tubes? Is their reading not progressing and they are kind of stalling, or they're regressing on their reading, whatever it is, or their math, say they were proficient in their multiplication tables and all of a sudden they're kind of losing that. So those are the things you really need to look on. Behavior is a top one as well. That is something that impacts a child's education. So it could be just behavior, you know? So don't think that it has to be multiple things. And as long as you're documenting it in a way that is visible and you're able to provide that as in your presentation, you know, my PPPN, plan, prepare, present, persuade, and negotiate. So when you present your plan of action to the school in your IEP, you can then persuade them to give your child compensatory services based off the evidence that you have collected, which is data. So the recordings are actually data for your own use and for the school. All right, which is why in the number 3, I have said, so you're going to write everything down, you're going to record, and then number 3 is you're going to send emails to the school each week. And in those emails, you're going to write up how your child did that week, and then you're going to support it with a video if needed. If there's nothing to send that week, then you don't send it. If there's another one to send the following week, then you send that. And you state things that are important to you. You don't want to ramble. You just want to state facts, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday kind of thing. All right. So you want to make sure that things are being done right now on your end so that you can then fight for compensatory services once school is back in play come September, August, whenever it is that school starts. Okay. So that's how you're going to obtain compensatory services. So I don't know if you guys know of Jack Robinson. So basically, there's a case that took place in the Supreme Courts. All right, so it is good to familiarize yourself with different cases, all right, because different cases give you information on the things that you can also bring into play. So there's a case, and I recently spoke with Jack Robinson in regards to this. It's called Endrew. I'm not really sure how you pronounce that. It's ENDREW F versus Douglas County School District. All right. And basically it was denied every step of the way. Basically they started out with due process, then it went to the next court, which is the circuit court. I'm pretty sure it's called like the 10th Circuit. And then it goes up to the Supreme Court. So once it got to everything was denied every step of the way. Well, in the Supreme Court, it was founded, all right, and the parents won over $1 million, and everything was refunded to them as far as lawyer fees. And what happened is the child wasn't making sufficient progress, and there is such a thing as sufficient progress, all right, and the court overturned the 10th Circuit's court decision because this child with autism was entitled to an education program that was calculated to provide merely more than de minimis educational benefit. All right. So de minimis is like a French word for very low and small and not much of. Okay. And in rejecting the 10th Circuit's reasoning, all right, listen to this, the Supreme Court determined to meet the substantive obligation under IDEA, a school must offer an IEP that is reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances. And the court also said that every child should have a chance to meet challenging objectives. All right. So this is a huge case that made, national news because it really put into play what is now upheld. All right. So it was a huge case in changing the way school districts, hopefully, thought of things in regards to FAPE and in regards to progress and that sort of thing. Not that they always listen. And that's the difficult part of it because school systems just screw up a lot. And, we'll get back to the case in just a second, but, the important part is to realize that school systems have so many children that they have to deal with, that mistakes happen. Whether it's purposeful or not, I can't respond to that. But what I can say is that's not your fault or our children's fault, and it's not their really the reason. There's no excuse for it, even though it does happen. All right. So again, if you're hopping on, post a 1 below if you're new. That's 1 through 3 times, and post a 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. All right, especially if you're catching the replay as well. All right, so basically the parents believed that the proposed IEP was basically the same as the previous IEPs, all right, under which their child's academic and functional progress has stalled, all right, and the IEP proposed by the public school was mostly unchanged from previous IEPs under which he made minimal progress. This is very important to remember. And basically, it clarified the substantive standard for determining whether a child's IEP under the centerpiece of each child's entitlement to Fape under IDEA is sufficient to confer educational benefit on a child with a disability. I think this is really important to remember and understanding that in discovering and determining Fape and the scope of Fape, this court reinforced the requirement that every child should receive and get the chance to meet challenging objectives and not just make this diminished progress that is so, so, so important. All right. So another thing that's important is the school systems have to meet the standards of state educational agencies, which is SEA. All right. And they have to also provide in conformity with an IEP that meets those requirements. Okay. So this is important, again, to understand, because if you can prove that Fape, and it doesn't have to do with progress, it could be with anything else. It could be services, it could be a modification or accommodation. If those aren't working, it's not sufficient, it's not helping the child make progress, then change has to be made, right? So this is really important, and I love this case because in being able to talk with Jack Robinson and him explaining this case to me, because I was talking to him about something that was on the table for me, and that was just really enlightening to hear from him, and his thoughts behind it, and then how to support it, and how important it is to understand that it may be denied in certain areas, but then it is upheld in the end. Now, the fact that this case went to the Supreme Court is why it made national news, and is what has changed in regards to how school districts are now looking at Fape, or again, how they should. And again, a lot of them are not. And again, that could be purposeful, it could be not, we don't know, but they do have a lot of children on their books, so to speak, and not as much manpower as they should. And it's unfortunate. And it does have a lot to do with budget. And again, that's unfortunate. And I'm sorry, but that's not my problem. And it's not your problem. And it's definitely not our kids' problem. So we have to make sure that the school systems are not only upholding your children's IEP with utmost fidelity, but that they're upholding Fape. And again, Fape is very difficult to prove. So you have to make sure that you understand how to support that with solid evidence, so that their rebuttal from the school, which is typically BS, okay, and is actually, I know when I make state complaints, their rebuttals always make me laugh. It's hilarious because the things that they say and the things that they come up with are funny. And the reason they're funny is because, again, if I make a state complaint, I make sure it's going to be founded. And so when they do rebut that, with their rebuttal, I find it enlightening, number one. Number two, they give you information that you can then use later. And this is what I wanted to get into in regards to also compensatory services. But also remember, if you record and you have your data and your documentation, you will get compensatory services at the end of the year and when school starts again. You just have to be able to have your data. And the only way to have data is to record. All right. So compensatory services, just so we cover that, is based off what you guys are gathering right now. That's what it's based off of, period. If you haven't joined my group, definitely do that. In basically 1 through 3, I say, take data as far as write everything down each day, and then it's not as much on you to try to remember a week's worth. If you just take some written data on notes, you can go download my action sheet. It's free. And on my educational vault at Autism Mama Rocks IEP.com, and you can take your notes and be proficient in remembering things that are happening that day, because we forget. Think about things that pop in your head. I always talk about this when you're in the shower. Or, you could be laying in bed watching TV and it just pops in your head. But if you don't write it down, you'll forget. So these are the important things of what I call the tediousness of writing things down. But it's so important. It's going to help you later. So do that so that your kids can get compensatory services if needed. Okay. If they don't, that's awesome. So definitely focus on that so you do get, and the school will be required to do compensatory and provide compensatory services since IDEA is still in play. And here's the cool thing, is school systems were banking on the fact that they were going to be given more time, 45 days, all these things, and that ended up not happening. All right. So it worked in our favor, as scared as we were, even myself, of what was going to happen and transpire come the new year and what they were going to be given. And that was scary because you just didn't know. And in a lot of our minds, again, even myself, you're thinking, okay, it's nobody's fault. So more than likely they're going to be given these provisions to take more time. But they weren't. And so IDEA is in place. Again, if you're getting distance learning, you're on the weekend, so to speak. Okay, so it doesn't come into play. But if you have mandatory virtual learning, which is a certain time each day, etc., your IEP is in play. Everything stays the same. It does not change. So it's as if they are in school physically. All right. Other than services can't be provided face-to-face. Okay, so your IEP is in play if you have mandatory virtual learning, but it's not face-to-face. So you can ask for whatever you want that's in your IEP. It's just not face-to-face. If you have distance learning, we're all screwed, and I am too. So we can't do anything until we go back to school. So that's where compensatory services go into play, and that's where your due diligence on making sure that that happens goes into play. All right, so that's going to be on you. So make sure that you do those simple things. Write everything down, send a weekly email, and video. That's it. That's all you got to do. All right. And you want to make sure you get on video that their writing has not been up to par or what it was in school. And hopefully, if you haven't, this is going to be a difficult one, but the administration is still open. State complaints can still be made. OCR complaints can still be made. Due process can still be done. So if I were you and you don't have data like sheets to compare, work to compare as far as what you should have already gotten in your last progress report and with your last progress report of, school work to compare. How's their handwriting now? And I'm just giving you an example of something that you can look at. Handwriting now and handwriting in regards to where they were in their last progress report. Or it could be behavior of what's documented versus what's happening now that you catch on recording. So it's important to have these documentations of data, is what it is, of you taking good solid data, so that those compensatory services are a lot easier to receive, because they're going to really put up their walls in regards to that. However, making state complaints and really pushing the subject in regards to what's going on. And again, if you collect that data, that video data, that written data daily, and that's what you provide as proof to the state, it's a done. So this is why it's very important. Compensatory service. Okay? So let's go back to this case, because this case is like so awesome, and it talks about so many things in regards to why Fape is important and how things have changed since this 2017 Supreme Court win of Indu versus Douglas County. All right. And Jack Robinson was the attorney who represented this family. All right. And he lives out in Colorado. All right. So that diminutive Latin term, okay, is basically small amount, minute, whatever word you want to call it in regards to not much of. It doesn't mean zero. It means not much of, not a lot of, those types of words. Okay. So that's how they won. And they proved how that was happening. And believe it or not, how to prove certain things that are going on wrong is number one. Again, I teach this in my course, which is really important, is knowing the right questions to ask. Annoy the crap out of the school by asking all the right questions and basically demanding those answers. If they don't answer within 3 to 5 business days, send the email again. Again, if they don't answer within 3 business days, send the email again. On such and such date, I initially sent this email. I had to resend it on this date. This is the 3rd time I'm requesting these responses to these questions. Please respond to the following questions below. All right, so that's what you have to do. You have to keep doing that, and then there comes a time where you literally can make complaints, and collaboration within teams is supposed to happen. And if that doesn't happen, then that's a problem. It's not so much a state complaint, but it can show some issue, and you can push that further with complaints, and then they're going to most likely start talking to you whether it's founded or not. All right. So let's move on to more things in regards to Fape. So let's talk real quick about, and this is actually where OCR comes in. All right, so if you have appropriate, take a look at this, and my course will be out. It's a mini course on services, accommodations, and modifications specific to those 3. Not my big course that walks you through the beginning of an IEP all the way to the end and gives you my PPPN process. We're talking about a mini course that is specific to services, accommodations, and modifications, what services are out there, how you know if they're right for your child, how to make sure that you get it, and so much more. Like, I added so much more in regards to data, giving you multiple different things to really look at, and how you actually can really make that decision. And then you can support it with evidence, objective data, to support it with an IEE, etc., progress reports, and so forth. Whatever it is that you have with that objective data, combining it all is going to be in your best interest, okay? Hi, Leanna. How are you? And Denicia. Hey, Jenna. Irene, Michelle, Nicole, Tara. Welcome, guys. Make sure you post a 1 below if you're new and a 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. Make sure to say hi, and welcome to all those replay people. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about circumstances. There's many different circumstances in which schools will take advantage of. Okay, so if they see that you start griping, then they're going to start collecting data and using more gaslighting words, and make you believe something different than what you're griping about. And that comes out really convincing. They're trained in this. It's kind of like, business people who are in the executive field. There's training on just talking with people, convincing people, and, being an influence to them and bringing them into what you're thinking, feeling, and what being just really what is known. And that is not always the case. Just because that's what they believe doesn't mean that that's what you believe. And respecting people's differences is important. However, in the IEP field, it's not about differences. It's not about what he thinks or what she thinks. Everything in regards to the IEP comes down to, what do you have to support what you have to say? That's it. All right? That's the only way to win. All right? Am I pretty good at finding loopholes? Sure. But you still got to have some data. If not, you got to get it before it can be fought. Okay? So you have to have data, and that's called objective data in regards to your subjective data that a lot of parents have. And like I've said to you guys, you're always right pretty much, or I would say 99% right. But it's not going to work for you in regards to presenting and persuading the team. All right. A lot of teams and a lot of people that I've recently talked with and doing my IEP makeovers is they're getting all these no's, and the school system will say, oh, well, we've already talked as a team and we don't agree with this evaluation or that evaluation, or we've already talked as a team and we've discussed the fact that we're not going to be offering this type of reading program. All right. When this child was diagnosed with dyslexia, when this child was given an IEE, and in that IEE it stated all factual information based off a really, really good test in regards to dyslexia, which is the CTOP-2, and then the school system didn't even consider it. So let me talk about some things that Jenna and I actually talked about. And I find this very enlightening, and she actually sent it to me, and it's really genius. Okay. It's on an attorney's website. And if you know, here's the thing, is you could be provided all kinds of information. All right. So I could send you, gosh, books and books of proof and things in regards to IDEA and all the CFR numbers and all the numbers that you have to look it up in. And guess what? It's just like getting your Google PhD that I talk about. Google PhDs does nothing for us. It informs us with all this information, and we feel like we're so smart, and we feel like we just have it down, and we feel like we got a plan. We're going to do this. We have our Google PhD now. We've Googled everything under the sun. We have all this information and what the rules and regulations are, that's 65 days to do an evaluation, and it's so many days to do an OCR complaint, and you have so many days to do a state complaint, and you have so many days to, rebut a PWN or an IEP, or if you don't sign an IEP, how long you have, that the school has to give you a PWN, all these things. Okay, so now we're smart, right? So here's the thing. You can go to college, but get your PhD, just like you can get your, what I call a Google PhD. And if you don't use the information in the right way to provide the general public with the correct information, it doesn't mean anything. Okay? So you have to be able to use your knowledge to benefit you in the way that you're trying to benefit you, and trying to present the case that you're trying to present, because that's what it is we become attorneys and we have no idea what we're doing. Okay. And most of us just have to wing it. I know I used to, and screwed up for 6.5 years and realized what I needed to do to move things forward. Does that mean you don't hit a standstill? Of course. But you have to keep pushing it. You can't get stuck in they're not doing anything about it. You can't get stuck in that, because that's what they want. They want you to get stuck. They want to put you in a position where you feel like you have no more control of a situation that you know is wrong. And that's not okay. So it's the ones that pursue it and persevere are the ones that, or will persevere. Okay. The ones that pursue it and don't stop, and that's what we have to do for our kids, in my opinion, because they deserve it. So let me go over some things with you that is interesting in regards to Fape. And it actually says on here, they're disasters that you want to avoid. So in talking about Fape and understanding what it means that we went over, so if you're catching the replay, go back to the beginning. I gave the whole definition of Fape, okay? It's important to understand that there's different ways to address Fape, okay? And the top way, and it's more of how it's being done, is a procedural type Fape, okay? Those are more substantial, would be my opinion. Okay. And I think that if you have a procedural issue in regards to FAPE, then you are going to succeed. And this is really important to understand, and it's really important to put into play. Who has had, if you want to respond, has had FAPE issues that you've tried to pursue and it just didn't work? You can respond if you want. Anybody? So procedural versus substantive complaints there's a difference between them. Okay, substantive issues kind of deal with your child's rights and what's appropriate and education and that sort of thing, and procedural is more issues with like technical aspects of things, and it's important to really understand this, okay, and know that you have to make sure that those are upheld, and then you need to understand the difference, because the procedural ones are a lot more detrimental to the school system than would any other type of complaint and issue that the school system is going to deal with. All right, so it's just important to understand that. So let me give you some. All right, these are really interesting, so if you want to write them down, you can. But it's really enlightening, in my opinion, to understand what they are and how you can use them to see if it maybe is something that you're dealing with, okay? So one case you want to know and understand is the Rowley case. That's Rowley. So I'll let you guys look that up. But one procedure disaster to avoid is engaging in action that appears to be a predetermination of placement, all right? Or action that may appear to deny parental input in decision making. Okay, so predetermination of placement would include actions such as fully developing and finalizing the IEP prior to the meeting with the parents and asking them to sign without discussion. All right, so that would be an example of that, and that's kind of the main thing that would be about. Okay, bringing a draft, okay, IEP to a meeting is not a procedural violation. It's just not looked at highly, as you've heard me talk about, in regards to the commentary that is associated with the with IDEA. All right, there's a commentary that is kind of the sister to IDEA. They go together, and it's not advised. However, I see the convenience of draft IEPs. So, but here's the thing that doesn't make sense is if you already have your last IEP, what is the draft going to add? Unless you've already discussed what needs changed. So have you already discussed goals and what's mastered and what hasn't? And if you haven't, then how can a draft be developed appropriately to be given to you to look at and review if that hasn't been discussed yet as a team? Or if there's more services or accommodations or modifications, say they're not working. Well, you have to discuss that as a team for different services, accommodations, and modifications to be put into a draft for you to look at. If not, you don't need a draft. Go off the last IEP. That's a draft. That is a solid document that's in place right now that you can look at fully, all right? Tear up, do whatever you need to do. I don't mean tear up like as in paper. And edit it yourself, transfer it into a doc in Adobe, and tear it up like I've shown, and make sure that you know how to make appropriate goals. Look at the goals that are there. So if it's your annual, then goals have to change, all right? But you can't change goals unless you know mastery has happened. So do you see how a draft can actually not work or be given to you, your thought process is put on that, then you don't really have a whole lot to provide in regards to it at the IEP meeting, because how is it different? I don't understand how it would be different if you haven't discussed things as a team, which, if you haven't done, is a predetermination of the IEP by the staff, not including you. Do you see the stickiness there? So just keep that in mind and know that, the regulatory commentary does not advise it because of that reason. So if you're given a draft, how is that changed from the regular IEP? If I were you, compare the draft that they send you to the IEP in place. I bet you they're identical. All right, maybe a couple changes, but more than likely they're going to be identical, because unless the staff change things on their own without you, the most important team member, then how do they provide a draft that's different from the current IEP when you guys haven't had your IEP meeting? Okay, so think of that. That's important to understand. And one thing they could do that I can give them is provide different goals if it's your annual, based off that child mastering the goals. However, don't provide me with a draft IEP with revised and changed goals unless you have support of that by report data collection. That is what I end every single goal with, as measured by report data collection. What does that mean? That you're given reports and data collection written in writing, should be graphed. You can actually put that in your IEP. And so that's what I like. Report data collection that is also graphed as measured by. All right, as measured by report data collection, and also graphical images of the data. All right, that's a genius thing to put in your IEP. Will they argue with you? Oh, we can't do that. Yes, they can. They can absolutely do that, just like they can put anything into the IEP. They can put into the IEP that once a week they're going to take your child to McDonald's. They can put anything into an IEP. So don't let them tell you, oh, we can't do that. Oh, we've never done that. Well, I don't care if you've never done that. You're going to do it now. That's how I want you reporting the data. There's no, in my IEP, I do not want as observed by teacher for a classroom observation. Nope, that's not sufficient to me. You can't show that to me. That topic doesn't make sense to me. What that teacher observes in that classroom means nothing to me. That's based off her opinion and what she observes. So if she's going to observe and that's going to be part of my IEP, okay, I'm going to come observe with her. We're going to observe it together. And then there's going to be a discussion as to what the outcome was based off both of our opinions, because there's nobody going to go visually watch my child, which they can do all they want, but don't think it's going to be the data that you're going to give me to support your statement of your child mastered this. Okay, I've even done, and I've said this back in the beginning, if you tell me that my child's mastered something, guess what? In that IEP meeting, guess what I do? Go get Skylar. Go get her. They've brought her down. I've tested what they said. 100%. Do I make her feel insufficient? Absolutely not. I make her feel like she's awesome. But what I'm doing, and they know, I'm testing what they said. All right, you say she's mastered it? Let me see. She should be able to do it with anybody, anytime, at any moment, if she's mastered it. So bring your kids into the IEP, make the school prove that your child can do it right in front of them. It puts them on the spot. It's the best thing ever. All right. So let's move down. Another thing is failing to share all relevant and evaluative information with the parents. So say they do an evaluation, they don't share the information with you, go over it with you in detail, et cetera, et cetera. That's important. All right. And you understanding what that means. So they need to explain it to you. All right. Another one that is important, and this is also a procedural one, is failing to make recommendations with sufficient clarity and finality. Okay, so that's important, and this will help avoid misunderstandings. All right. So an example of that is, although a school district met with the parent on several occasions to review possible placement options for the student, such as meetings were not the equivalent of providing the parents a meaningful role in the process of formulating the IEP, because the district did not formally offer an IEP placement prior to the placement of the child in like a residential program or a day school or whatever. Okay, so that's super important. And the parent's refusal to agree is important. All right, that's when you kind of need to get your IEP into what's called a stay put status until you figure it out. All right, so let's just go over a couple more. Failing to make educational recommendations, decisions based upon individual needs of the student. Skylar's calling me right now. Hang on. Sorry about that. Okay. She calls me and I hooked it up to my phone or my computer. All right. So the next thing that we're going to address is failing to notify parents of their rights. Make sure anytime the school system messages you that they provide procedural safeguards, okay? And that's usually given to you after an IEP meeting with your PWN, and anytime they make recommendations and such things like that. Okay, and failing to have required staff members is important. Remember, service providers and related service providers are not required members, but you can request them to be there, which if your child has speech or OT, etc., they should be there. All right, and you can even say, I don't want my IEP until this person or that person can be there. Okay. All right, another one is failing to allow for participation of persons brought in by the parents. That could be an advocate, that can be an attorney, whatever. You just have to let them know in advance. And then substantive disasters is like failing to make recommendations in regards to that evaluation, that IEE. They have to take that into consideration. And what they don't take into consideration has to be put into that PWN. So I've realized, and a lot of people that I've talked with don't even know what a PWN is, number one, or number two, don't receive them. So if you don't receive them, that's a big deal. So if you go to an IEP meeting and you talk about things and there's things that are approved or said, and many of you have come back to me and said, well, they said this and they said that and they said this and then they didn't put it into the IEP. Well, those are the things that should be in the procedural safeguards. What they approved at that meeting, what was discussed at that meeting, and what was rejected at that meeting, all in which need to have detailed explanation as to why. Okay, so if it was rejected, why? If it was approved, why? All right, it could be, for an example, an IEE could be approved based off the evidence provided in regards to the testing. Okay, and that's what they would say. So that makes sense, right? It was rejected because XYZ, which is very hard to accept a rejection on an IEE if it's done by a licensed professional that is typically more educated than the school systems. Oh my goodness. Follow me again. All right. So that's important to remember. Let me text her and let her know to stop calling me. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is failing to appropriately and timely respond to requests for an independent educational evaluation. So that's the IEE. If you disagree with the school's evaluation, you can request an IEE. They have two choices. They can approve the IEE, and it needs to be approved right away. They need to send you a consent form, and then it needs to take place of your choice of who you want to go to. If the school system is paying for it, they have a right to copies, and they'll probably have you sign this, to copies of that IEE directly sent to them. If you go on your own and get an IEE, which I personally highly suggest, and you can actually have the school pay for it too. So you have your evaluation from the school. You go yourself and get an IEE. You disagree with the school's evaluation, have them pay for it because you disagree, get another IEE by a separate provider, then you have three to put together. Okay? Three different providers providing different thought processes and recommendations, and then you put them all together and have a summary of what's going on, and it really gives you a lot of information that you can then go by. All right, and I've told people, typically Medicaid and, different insurances will do different, evaluations, whether it be speech, OT, PT, psychological, one of my favorites, which is the psychoeducational. You have your neurological, all these different things that, all these different insurances do pay for. And especially with like services, a lot of insurances pay up to a certain amount, even Medicaid. So don't think that you are out of the loop or can't do that based off a certain insurance. You just have to call them, and sometimes you have to go within network, but that's it. So another thing is failing to include measurable goals. All right. And this is actually on most school districts' websites, yet they don't provide measurable goals or appropriate measurable goals. All right. And that's important to have. They have to be measured by something. All right. You don't want anything to say 3 out of 4 trials, consecutive trials. I've talked about this so many times. You don't want it to say as observed by the classroom teacher, or as by classroom schoolwork. That can be included, but you always want that report data collection. So making vague generalizations, recommendations regarding the least restrictive environment, and so on and so forth. So these are just different things that are in regards to Fape, okay? Their failure to address extended school year, all right? So look at your IEP, because a lot of IEPs that I've recently seen in my IEP makeovers that I've been doing, it seems like I've been doing 3 or 4 a week, where it says already ESY, is this child considered for ESY, or does this child qualify for ESY? And then the answer is no. It needs to say NA, because they don't know that yet. Okay, you have a IEP August, September, October. How do they know if ESY is going to be needed by June? They don't. So don't put no on there. That kind of screws you. Don't put yes, because you don't know yet. Okay, so you got to negotiate. You want yes, they want no. NA, we don't know yet. It could even say this data has not been provided as of yet. We will revisit this topic in January or February. Okay, so you want to make sure, I don't care if you have NA, you can have a description of when you're going to address it, how it's going to be addressed, and then a team decision will then at that time be made. Okay, so when, how, and who decides. Okay, so make sure you take all those things into consideration. All right, make sure transitions are provided, and make sure that you have a summary of that. And make sure that if your it's between 14 and 16. So if your child's between 14 and 16, transition services and all those types of things need to go into play. Make sure your child has a BIP in place if they have behavior issues, and that is super, super important. All right. All right, so, and then failing to develop a plan for the provision of services in the IEP. All right, here's another thing that I've recently found in IEPs and the IEP makeovers that I'm doing, which I'm getting ready, guys, to do a discount. Maybe it'll be tomorrow for Mother's Day. So basically, PM me if you're interested in one. But in services and accommodations. All right, modifications even. I'm looking at these IEPs, and they suck. I don't think I've seen one IEP that was good. All right, and believe me, I'm still tweaking mine. All right, mine's good, but I'm still tweaking it. All right, and I think you're always going to keep tweaking it. But under services, accommodations, and modifications, schools trick you by putting a large number. Okay, so I saw an IEP recently, and it said direct speech services, and then it gave 1,260 hours per year. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is? I actually do know what that is, because I know how to divide the amount of school weeks into what that 1,260 is. But what I don't know is how many weeks there actually are going to be. So there's 38 weeks in actuality that should be, but it's never like that. Okay, that doesn't include spring break, Christmas break, any of that. All right, snow days, etc. All right, and then it doesn't come into play when it comes to COVID for sure. And so it's just not very clear. I hate that. If you're going to have a service accommodation modification, it better be clear. It needs to say, this child, okay, for the service, direct speech services, all right, direct one-on-one, whatever you want to say, all right, speech therapy. Then it needs to say 2 times a week, 1 time a week, 3 times a week at 30 minutes in therapy room. 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, or how many days it is, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't care. And then how long, all right? That's measurable. That's what service is going to be provided, being specific. Your SMART goals, right, goes into play for services, accommodations, and modifications. What is going to be put in play? One-on-one direct speech services. When is that going to happen? Oh, 3 times per week. Perfect. For how long? Okay, so it's by who, I guess you could say, all right, or what. Then it's going to be when, okay, how many times a week. And then it's going to be how much, which is important to know, 3 times a week, 2 times a week, all right. And you need to also know, is it 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, okay. And then where is it going to be, all right, in the speech therapy room, resource room, whatever. You make sure that it's one-on-one and that nobody else is in that room. All right, unless it's like one other child getting speech therapy or whatever. But you need to be clear on where it's at. Where is it going to be? How many kids are going to be in there? Is my child going to be distracted? Is it going to be, a more restrictive, one-on-one setting, which is really what you want, especially with speech. So make sure you ask questions in regards to that, but it has to be specific. Same thing with OT, same thing with reading therapy and services, whatever. All right. So modifications. All right. Remember, modifications is a change of. Okay. I go into detail and detail and detail on this in my mini course because there's so much involved in the laws with it, and who's responsible, and how you go about knowing everything that's involved in it. And do you know there's hundreds and hundreds of modifications, accommodations, and services that you could choose from. Even therapeutic recreational, like I've said. I've done therapeutic writing, different, drama courses, all kinds of things that you have out there. Summer camps, and that's your therapeutic recreational. So that's important to know. All right. So make sure there's clarity there. All right. And modifications are the change of. The child's in the, least restrictive environment. The child is going to be given a different test than the children with non-disabilities, and it's going to be much easier and clearer to read. Or a child with disabilities is not going to have to present in front of the class because of anxiety or whatever. That's a change. They're not going to have to do something. So a modification, or no, a accommodation to presenting would be that child's given an outline of what they need to do, and they kind of just need to fill in the blanks. Or that child is supported by maybe another student that comes up with non-disabilities that just is their buddy. It could be they're given footnotes kind of thing. There's so many things that you can put in play in regards to accommodation. So an accommodation is they still have to do everything that the child with non-disabilities does, but they have an accommodation to support them in a better way. A modification is a change of what children with non-disabilities does, but yet they're still in the least restrictive environment. Okay, that's called the hierarchy of services, accommodations, and modifications. Okay, so I think we covered IEP stuff, Fape, and compensatory services, right? So for those of you who are new, hopping on, post a 1 below, watching the replay, post a 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. Go back and watch the replay. It's good information that you guys definitely need, and you want to be able to have the right statement that you say in regards to a Fape type complaint, and understanding really what that means. And it's hard to understand exactly what that means because it's written so weird. We just go off of, oh, well, that's not appropriate for my child. Well, just because it's not appropriate doesn't always mean it's fake. All right. And so it's super important to understand that just because you feel it's not appropriate, that could be that subjective data that you have, is not going to necessarily always make it fake. And I've even made complaints in the past. So learn from my mistakes, which is why one of the reasons why I do what I do, and you not taking so much time and having to learn all this, is I've made complaints in regards to Fape in the past, but was told by the state it wasn't that I didn't have a solid complaint or a good complaint that was accepted by them. Because when you make a complaint, they pick and choose of what you wrote, and if it's against Fape or a violation, etc., they accept it. So it was accepted, but then I didn't provide enough information. Okay, so you want to make sure that you understand what it means. Okay, that if you're Googling and you're one of those people that go out and get your Google PhD, you better understand what you're reading. What you read is not always what it means. Okay, and if you understand what it means, if you don't know how to put it into play and present it and persuade it in the right way, then that's not going to work either. All right. So that's important. And one of the things that, gosh, I got to thank you guys, because I've done so many, like I said, IEP makeovers. And I've learned too from these parents and seeing these different IEPs, because they're all different and they all have different information in them. And I get excited going through them because no IEP is perfect. And, there's a lot of things that are just worded wrong and just not effective. And there's no way that this parent is going to be, and these parents are going to be provided with the right data and the information. And there's no provisions to state how that child's going to get services and how that can be proven to the parent. One thing that's important that I will just cover before I hop off here, because I have gone over an hour, is you need to also make sure that you know that service is being provided. You need to make sure that that accommodation or modification is being provided. And so in your IEP, there has to be something that shows you that. Okay? There's got to be something that says, this is how I'm going to know that you're going to be given, your child's given this service, accommodation, modification. You can go on my website and download my communication sheet, which is very detailed, and I give you one that I have, and then I give you a blank one that you can write on either on the computer or you can print it out and then provide it to the school. You can even email it to the school, download it and email it to the school to say and provide it, also in an IEP, saying this is what I want filled out every day. And you can tweak it. Like I said, you get my example, but then you can tweak it to meet your child, which is great. And then you need to make sure you specify in your IEP that this communication sheet is going to be filled out daily and sent home. All right. And then you need to state that each provider, whoever it is making the comments and checking the boxes off, that's the person who writes. So if they go to OT, the OT needs to write. If they go to speech, the speech therapist needs to write and sign. And then if they're in gen ed half day, then they need to put their stuff. If they're in special ed half day, then they need to put their stuff. All right. So that you have to know how this stuff is being done. All right. And you have to know that it's provided. All right. Because they can tell you anything. And the other thing, there was one more thing, and look, it just left my head, that you need to take into consideration. Let me think for a second. So is there anyone out there that may be going through some of this stuff, that this just sounds familiar to you, that you're like, oh my God, this is stuff I'm dealing with? So don't forget to post a 1 below if you're new and a 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. Make sure you say hi. I want to get to know you. And if you haven't joined the group, definitely do that. And if you haven't clicked notifications, make sure you do that too. And most of you know I provide free discovery calls. You can click above where it says book now, and I do a free discovery call with you to figure out, where your needs are, what's up, where you need help. All right, let me see. And happy Mother's Day early, guys. Have a wonderful day tomorrow. That's why I'm doing a Saturday morning, because I didn't want to bother you guys on Mother's Day. I wouldn't want to listen to me on Mother's Day. I don't think that parents need to hear about IEPs on Mother's Day. All right? I don't think we need to hear about our kids at all. Part of my Mother's Day. Sometimes I like spending time with my kids on Mother's Day. Sometimes I'm like, let me just have time for me. So post below what you guys are going to do for Mother's Day. My husband wants to take a hike. I don't want to take a hike. And it's kind of chilly here, and I don't want to take a hike. And I don't want to be like, I don't really want to take a hike. That doesn't sound like fun. Which I love hiking. I do. But I don't feel like it right now. I don't know. I'm not feeling it. What are you guys going to do for Mother's Day? Post below what you're going to do. All right, so any questions? Go ahead and post your questions if you have them. Hello, Cynthia. You say, as a parent, yes, TRICARE pays for everything. So if you're military, it pays for everything. As a parent, how do you know that your child gets the served these minutes daily, weekly? Yeah, so hopefully I answered your question, because that communication sheet is huge. I love my communication sheet. It's awesome. If you download it, it's super cool, because you'll see like how detailed it is. And it's important, because then the school systems kind of have to be upheld by it. The other thing is you want to make sure that you're getting your progress reports on a quarterly basis, whatever that is. Is it 9 weeks? Is it 10 weeks? Whenever those report cards go out, that's when you should get your progress reports. Don't accept a progress report that says this is the goal, the annual goal. And then they give most of them give numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 being mastered, 1 being not started, and then everything in between. Okay, that told me nothing. How did you come up with that number? Start asking questions based off what they give you. How did you come up with that number? What led you to believe that it was that number? And then always make sure that there's detailed comments. Okay, so don't just accept the comments though as how did you come up with that number? Yes, it needs to be put in writing, but show me. Okay, so that's another thing you can put in your IEP. Every 9 weeks, or whatever it is in your state, whenever the report cards are given out. Here in Virginia, it's 9 weeks. So every 9 weeks, a detailed progress report with comments will be provided to the parent, along with data to support what is put into the progress report. Okay. Another thing is with services. I wanted to tell you about this. If the service provider is absent, they have to make up that session. It's not your child's problem that they're sick. They're going to be sick. That's obviously a given. Or if someone passes in their family, or they take off for whatever reason needed, that's fine. But they have to make up that service. And if it's going to be for a prolonged period of time, a new one has to then be provided to them. Okay? All right. And also, I request weekly emails from all service providers, related service providers, etc. Weekly emails every Friday. I love the communication sheet. I'm a teacher, and I have had issues in the past where students were not pulled for their minutes. Yeah, and it's not the teacher's job to say, hey, speech therapist, you coming to get Sam? You guys don't have time to do that. My daughter's a teacher too, and she's told me all about that, all this burden is placed on them. And it's not the general education teacher's job to cater to just your child. Sorry, it's not, okay? They have to cater to 32 or 28 kids. They can't just serve one. They have to serve all. Do they have to uphold, and this teacher, Cynthia, can probably adhere to this and support what I'm saying. Do they have to uphold the IEP? Of course. Do they have to uphold all the services, or not the services, but accommodations and modifications? Of course. But do they have to cater one-on-one to just your child? Absolutely not. So if your child needs that one-on-one, then either in that classroom based off that teacher, because a lot of more experienced teachers will be provided a lot more special needs children because they have more experience with that. But then a lot of them will be provided with a para that helps everybody. Or if there's a child that needs more one-on-one, then that child needs to have a one-on-one, okay? Because again, it's not the teacher's job to just cater to one child. That's not fair, all right? And that's not providing FAPE to all children, okay? Because FAPE is based off of what is given to children with non-special needs is given to children with special needs, okay? So that would kind of deplete the whole point, all right? So thank you, Lily. I appreciate that. And all right, I think we're done. Okay. So welcome, Anna. I see that you're new. All right. So if you're catching the replay, just post a 1 below if you're new, 2 below if you're an oldie but goodie. And that's it for today, guys. Make sure your IEPs are implemented with fidelity. Make sure things are taken care of. Look up the case, Andrew versus Douglas County. I love that freaking case. It's awesome. You can go to www.ed.gov, and I believe the case is on there. And it goes into detail on what de minimis means, what reasonably calculated means, what it goes through everything, questions and answers. It's really enlightening. And this attorney is genius. I mean, when I talked to him, he like talked over my head for a second. When I had to like bring him back down and say, whoa, explain this to me. Because it goes into such detail, this case, and especially when it goes up to the top of the top at the Supreme Court. I'm glad it did, and he said that too, that this case was denied at due process. It was denied in the 10th Circuit, and then it was upheld, and the school system was found of negligence, of FAPE, in the Supreme Court, which is the top of the top, and that's when things really come out, okay? Because in the end is what the result is, and this parent, you know, that I want to say it was 1.8 million the parents received in compensation, and then the child was given all kinds of compensatory services, and all their fees were paid and so much more because they had to go up that high based off something that was founded by the Supreme Court. And I believe on all of this documentation, it tells you what judge and all that kind of stuff. So now this case has made history, it seems like, in the special education world. And you should definitely read it and get familiar with it because it's grounds for everything going forward. And that's why I talk a lot about, you know, I used to be kind of selfish when it came to IEP stuff. I never, before I started doing what I was doing, I never really talked about it, you know, thinking that my child would lose her stuff because I talked about what I knew. And that's not the case at all. They actually are more intimidated by the fact that you do talk about it and you have no problems going public and telling the good, the bad, the ugly, and, you know, the so-so, you know, so to speak, and just being transparent with it and clear on whether it be lessons learned or, hey guys, I made a mistake, don't do this. Those are important things to get out there because you don't want the same mistakes happening and you want things to be clear. And it's important too to not be selfish like I was in the beginning, and to, you know, either invite people to this page and to the group, or share it so that other people can, you know, hopefully be enlightened with more information that could possibly help them. Because what you guys do now in advocating for your kids is going to help the kids coming. All right. And that's important because we don't want this to be something that continues. We want to take a stance in it and make sure that our kids and hopefully other kids are supported with this. And not that it's not going to still happen, but that we do at least our due diligence in making sure that it possibly can. And if it helps one person, then that's awesome. All right. So you're welcome, Cynthia. No problem. I love the communication sheet. Okay. Yeah, I read that. All right, guys, have a wonderful Saturday, and I will talk to you guys more than likely on Monday evening around 8, but I will post in advance when I'm going to go live, and then I got to get over to my group to start the IEP challenge number 21. So if you guys join the group, you'll hear that, but you'll also be able to go back and watch those other videos. It's just right under video. All right, so I will talk to you guys soon. And if you haven't caught, go under videos and catch the, it was in March. It was a webinar that I did about all kinds of stuff. All the top mistakes, the 3 top mistakes that parents make in before and in the IEP meeting, plus ESY, because that's important to know about, the 3 top mistakes. And then it's also important to know about ESY, because ESY is not off the table yet, guys. It's not. So don't let your teachers say that. It's not. And if things open, like here it opens, I think June 10th, then the school system can't say, oh, we're just providing it online. They have to provide it in-house if things are now open. So make sure you address that, send an email, find out what's going on in regards to that, and when things are opening, or find out, I'm sure you can find out on the governor's site, etc. And then you can use that date in your email. All right, have a good day, guys. Bye.